and thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be with you in person, but I'm so pleased to be able to send this video honouring our Windrush pioneers like John Richards, 97 and looking absolutely fabulous, and of course the late Sam King, MBE, who along with Arthur Torrington founded the Windrush Foundation. It's so important that we take the time to celebrate our pioneers, because it's always said, if we don't celebrate ourselves, who will? And the Windrush pioneers, like John, like Sam, have given us so much. Black people like me in this country, whether we were born here or have come to live here, owe so much to you and stand on your shoulders. We know that it's no mistake that this country is now the 5th richest country in the world, and that wealth came off the back of slavery, came off the back of colonialism, and came off the back of having people come from the Commonwealth to help rebuild the public services after the war. These fantastic people, the Windrush generation, have given so much to this country, unfortunately remain disrespected, and during a period of time when the hostile environment, which continues to today, were dehumanized, detained and treated with complete contempt. Now, whilst we've seen apologies since then, the reality of the situation is that the Windrush generation continue to be denied justice. They're not being given the proper right to the compensation that they deserve, and some are even still being denied their status in this country, even though it has been acknowledged that they were treated unfairly. Now, when we celebrate our Windrush pioneers, these are the things that we need to continue to highlight. Yes, absolutely, we should talk about the fantastic work that has been done, but every single time we do, we must remind people that we will never stop fighting for justice for the Windrush generation. Justice delayed is justice denied, and that's exactly what we're seeing at the moment. So we salute you, we honour you, we thank you for everything that you've done and everything that we know that you'll continue to do, and we recommit today to fight for justice for the Windrush generation.
Right. Yeah, welcome everyone. Real pleasure to be with you all today as we celebrate the life of one of our amazing pioneers today, and glean from the amazing stuff that he's done in his life and his own wisdom that, you know, will be shared with us later. But yeah, that's me. Okay, great. Well, Elijah is my son, and then naturally the great grandson of Sam King, and he will begin by playing 2 pieces for you today. One is called Dinosaur Dance. It's quite a jolly piece, sort of to reflect the anticipation, excitement, but also curiosity that those who came on the Windrush may have felt before they arrived. And then he'll play a second piece after that, and I think you'll definitely hear the transition because they are different pieces in terms of pace and tempo. But the second piece is called Spanish Dance, a more reflective and a slight air of solemnness, but it's also carried with a sense of strength, hope and vision. And yeah, I hope as you listen, you'll also hear those sort of tones of emotion and thought in the music as well. Okay, over to you, Elijah.
Thanks. That's right. Right now, this is important. This is the first slide of about, say, 6 or 7 of them. And I wanted to show you that John Richards has become a part of the curriculum, because here is this man there on your right, far right, and he's age 22, and he's standing there among the 3 men. And the one in the middle, I think I might have mentioned this to you many times before, his name is Harold Wilmot, the elder brother of Alan Wilmot. And then on your very left, that's John Hazel, who became a boxer. Not fact became a boxer, but who actually went to become, I think, possibly a part-time boxer in Liverpool. I don't think he was full-time, but at least we know that he was a boxer, and he came over to this country, settled in this country, you know, to engage in boxing and become a champion, if so. And therefore, you know, he's part of the Windrush generation, really. And I think that this is so important for us to consider that John, who for the first time saw this picture in 1998, when we had the 50th anniversary. It was the first time that John saw this picture after 50 years of living in this country. And that was quite something. At that time, you know, John was fully unaware, was just unaware that that photograph, you know, had the 3 of them in it. And in fact, later on, you'll be able to see and hear from Bill Hern, who will talk a little bit more about the picture. So let's get to the next slide. And by the way, before I go further, this is the front cover of the Edexcel History Key Stage 4 textbook, all right? And so John is there. John is there, I suppose, permanently, because he's to become a permanent fixture on a curriculum. All right, so let's go to the next slide. And here again, now those of you who can identify John, John is at the bottom left. All right, you can see his hat there, those 4 men in your bottom left corner. John is there smiling, and again, he's in these pictures. Whenever you see them, he's at least, you know, he's viewed because he was photogenic and indeed well dressed. Now, a person that you may not be able to recognize, I don't think you would ever would, not knowing, if you go to your top right, the top right, there's a gentleman there. His name is Harold Simpson, and that particular picture with those 2 young ladies there, or two youngsters, on your very left is a gentleman by the name of Harold Simpson, whom I knew well. He's passed. That's right. That's the one that the cursor is on. Harold Simpson. He's passed away now. He would have been like 100 and plus if he was alive today. He's from British Guyana, as we know it now, and it gives you an impression that an idea that they were from all parts of the colonies, and Guyana, Trinidad, and so on. Barbados and Bermuda, Jamaica, and so on. So get to the next slide. Okay, one more slide. We can just go back to the menu.
I did press the button. Let's give it a couple
of seconds. Okay. Yes, it often actually just freezes. And this is an example of freezing.
Oh, finally, there you go. Okay,
good. Now, this one here now is important for us to again see. John is posing there on your very right. And what's interesting as well is that I went along with him and an official from London Transport Museum to the Deep Shelter. And we took John to the Deep Shelter, which I've always mentioned when I have to speak about the Deep Shelter, 1 layer below the Northern Line. And yes, you know, John was trying to remember when this picture was taken, how it was taken. and so on and so forth. Now, if you look to your very left, there's a man of I should say Indo Caribbean background there, and the guy next to him in a hat, I believe is either Kitchener or it's Lord Beginner, but I can't say, because these two men aren't around anymore, and therefore we can't say for sure about them, because again, not many people know much about this particular photograph. So let's get to the next one. Next slide. Right. No, again, this one, from what I know, they were asked to pose and look at a newspaper, a page of a newspaper, looking as though they're looking for jobs, and that was in 1948. Could you imagine that? They're coming to the country, none of them there, those young men, and they're mainly young, as you could see how they look, 22, 21, and so on, looking for jobs, and that's a pose that has become iconic as such. Okay, the next slide. And what John has told me, and in a few minutes, I would hope to be able to play a video, and I hope it plays. Now, John joined, got a job at British Railways in 1948. It was John's first job in the country, the first job, and John remained in that job for more than 40 years. Isn't that something? Right? First job in 1948, and then 40 years on, and beyond 40 years, John is able to, spend his time in a job that he loved, doing engineering type work and all variety of jobs in the, in British Rail, and that to me is like an example, a kind of a role model that I believe that John has shown here, in the sense that he is, well, he's showing that he has a particular stability. He is no longer jumping from job to job, although I understand that you can have 4 jobs in a day. If you don't like one job in the morning, you say, right, I'm leaving, go to the exchange. They will actually be able to give you another job if you want it, because there are vacancies, and that is how it was in those days. And John, of course, in his particular case, he remained in the British Railways and retired there, and that's how it was. And the next one, the next slide. Okay, and I think this is the last slide actually. And what I wanted to do, we have on your right, the right slide, you've got Avril Horsford is an educationist. And when we had this event, this launch last month, we had a photograph, we had a picture. In fact, we had the book, I should say, not a picture. We had the book, which was given to John eventually, and there is John. Isn't that something, folks? This is 74 years after. It's marvelous that we can have this kind of history being told. And eventually we'll be able to let you have, for your own possession, a video. It's going to be a free video of the life of John Richards. Isn't that something? Myself and a colleague went along last Sunday. Well, I said last Sunday, yeah, that's just about six days ago. And we actually interviewed John. It was Angela Corbena. We went along and we interviewed John, and we have a part of the interview this evening, and we would hope to play it, and we hope you hear it actually. But just to give you an idea of what Windrush Foundation wants to do, our intention is to present a history of the men and women who came and settled, the pioneers, the reason for calling it Windrush, right? They are the reasons for calling it Windrush, for calling what we're doing Windrush. and they are the reason for this Windrush generation. All right. When you hear about the Windrush generation, don't always think or often think about those who have been so unfortunate to have been suffering injustice, you know, by the Home Office, and they became what is now known as the Windrush victims. All right, but let's consider those people who came on the ship, like John, like Harold, Wilmot, like John Hazel, who came on the ship and who made the ship an iconic symbol of the presence of West Indians in this country. So I believe that's the last slide, isn't it, Ebony? And then that's correct. Yeah, so that's it.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks, Ebony. Just going back to John Hazel. John was one of 4 boxers that a boxing manager called Mortimer Martin brought across from Jamaica to fight in England. And while he was on the Windrush, he picked up a 5th boxer, and he also brought his own chef with him. So it was a team very much who went to Birkenhead and all trained together to be boxers. John was probably the best of the 5. He never made British champion or anything like that. Although the son of Vernon Solis, who was one of the passengers, Vernon Solis Jr., did want to be a British champion. But the really strange thing to me is that regularly boxing competitions would be black versus white, and there would be, say, 5 bouts, and it would be a black man fighting a white man on every occasion, and it was kind of like a competition, which just seems bizarre in this day and age. But yeah, John Hazel was a pretty good boxer. Sorry, I know I've gone off.
No, that's good to know. I didn't know that. Thanks.
Okay, but it wasn't what you wanted to hear. So yeah, what I wanted to do today was talk about the West Indies in the spring of 1948, leading up to the disembarking at Tilbury in June, and then move on to some work that we're doing to try and tell the stories of each of the 1,027 passengers and the 15 stowaways, and if we can get the information, the 350 crew members, because we don't really know very much about the Windrush passengers before the journey or after the journey. You know, what happened to them, what became of them. So just going back to the spring of 48, the earliest advert we can see for Windrush voyages is the 15th of April in the Gleaner. And we know from Sam King's book that he knew about the journey 3 weeks before the advert, which really makes us believe that this journey was organised probably February or March, say 3 months before the Windrush actually sailed, which kind of blows a hole in the theory that this was a captain who got to Trinidad and realised his ship was going to come back empty. So should he offer these cheap tickets to West Indians? You know, the voyage was organised long before the Windrush even left London on its outward journey. And there are quite a few legends about the Windrush that aren't true. I think it was about the 10th of June, there were reports that it had sunk. And the people on board knew that, you know, and it was denied, and obviously it hadn't sunk. And the other rumour that John probably would remember is that the rumour went around that everybody was going to get a £4 bonus when they arrived in Tilbury, and there was huge disappointment when that was proved not to be the case. But going back to the spring of 48, the Jamaican authorities were a bit late in realising that they should have notified the UK authorities of this impending arrival of 400-500, however many people seeking work. And it was the 11th of May before they actually wrote to the British and said that, effectively apologising, saying, we're really, really sorry this has happened. We're doing our best to try and sort it out. We put in adverts in newspapers to say, if you've booked on this Windrush, please don't go unless you've got the offer of a job and you've got accommodation, because there will be nothing for you when you get there. But of course, by then the horse has bolted. We're almost sailing from Trinidad at the start of the journey. And later that month, somebody in the Jamaica Colonial Secretary's office wrote to the British government apologising again. And you can tell the attitude. He began the letter by saying, "It is an appalling thing with which to be saddled. So this was his reaction, you know, that all these West Indians are going to arrive. We're really sorry we didn't tell you earlier. We've done our best to try and stop them. And what can we do but apologise? And the matter was debated in the House of Commons. Obviously, as ever, there were some people for, some people against. And ironically, it was the Barbados authorities who wrote to the Prime Minister, Clement Attlee. I say ironically because there was only one Bayesian on board the Windrush, but they wrote a very, very strongly worded letter to Attlee saying, you know, you must treat these people well. We don't like your attitude and your approach to this. And Attlee saw sense. He said, look, we've got to let these people in. They've every right to be here. And as a kind of aside, he said, and don't worry too much, because after one winter, I'm sure they won't be able to bear it and they'll go home. So Attlee took responsibility for receiving the West Indians in the best manner possible. And what he did was he arranged transport so they could be transported from Tilbury into the city. He arranged welfare officers to receive the passengers and help them try and find jobs, accommodation, and so on. And he also organised the deep shelter as well, so that those that didn't have an address to go to would have some shelter. And again, quite oddly, a lot of newspapers thought this was a big mistake because this wouldn't deter people following on future ships, because if they thought they were going to get pampered in that manner, they would continue to come. So people thought it was perhaps a weakness that Attlee was so accommodating, although it doesn't seem that accommodating really. I mean, the deep shelter wasn't exactly luxurious. So when the passengers arrived at Tilbury, they arrived in the middle of a dock strike, a huge dock strike. So there was a backlog of ships trying to get into the Thames, into London. And they had to unload their own luggage, their own baggage, and so on. The reaction of most of the people who got there from reports is that they found it very cold, wouldn't they? The clothing vouchers weren't ready for their arrival, so they couldn't get warmer clothing. They found the cost of living pretty horrendous. They were quite surprised by how expensive things were. Some of them used to stay on the underground all day long to stay warm out of the cold. And the food wasn't always brilliant. The accommodation was difficult to get, and jobs weren't as easy to get as perhaps they'd been led to believe.
Bill, one point, is there another slide you have? Because it's not...
Oh, yes, sorry, Arthur, yeah.
Hasn't moved, okay.
It was only that one, sorry.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, on board the ship, I know that Sam wasn't very impressed with Lieutenant Johnny Smythe because he felt that Smythe was very negative about the arrival in England, and I think he referred to him as the stern and inflexible lieutenant from Sierra Leone. And he said his message was to strike discouragement and perhaps fear into the already distraught passengers. So I think Sam was thinking a lot more positively.
Yes, he certainly wasn't. He wasn't impressed.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mentioned the stowaways. There were 15 stowaways who were apprehended on arrival, and they got a very lenient. They got a £1 fine and 10 years in jail because they were actually here legally. They hadn't broken any laws in entering the country. They were here legally, but their offence was being on the ship without permission and being on the ship without a fare, paying a fare. So once they'd served their 10 days, they were free to stay in Britain. They were British citizens, and that was it. What we don't know is what happened to every passenger after arrival. You know, how many went back, how many stayed? If they did go back, where did they go back to? Not many went back to the West Indies, but a lot of them thought they'd try their luck in the United States. But until we get to the end of the 1,027 passengers, we won't have exact numbers. But, you know, not everybody found it easy, and some people did go back. Obviously, a lot of people didn't, and most of them say that they don't regret it. You know, they're glad that they stayed. They're glad that they stuck it out, and they wouldn't do it differently again. Some have written their life stories. Sam, obviously, William Chong, and that makes the research really easy because we got first-hand knowledge of what happened to these people, what their backgrounds were before they came here, and so on. And we've also, and this is a barefaced plug for this book that David Cleave and I have written, but also we've written biographies of some of the passengers, so we know all about Mona Baptiste's life, for example. So we do know quite a lot about the some of the passengers, the more high-profile passengers. But most are simply names on a passenger list. We don't really know where they came from, where they went, anything like that. And what does the passenger list tell us? And I'd say very, very little indeed. It certainly doesn't tell us anything about them as individuals. Now, that's not easy to read, but the original version isn't easy to read either. And there are a lot of misprints, and Ancestry have put a lot of this data onto their website. It's all hit and miss. Some have gone on, some haven't. Goldsmiths reproduced the landing cards a few years ago, and to be honest, it's strewn with errors, and I would say is unreliable. So what we're trying to do in the Windrush Foundation is get a definitive database of each of the passengers, each of the stowaways, and hopefully each of the crew members that we preserve forever, you know, for the benefit of historians, researchers, genealogists in the future. And so what do we see on the passenger list? Well, port of embarkation is usually accurate. Where the passengers are going to land, Tilbury. Oddly enough, it doesn't show passengers that did an interim journey, because some passengers went from Jamaica to Bermuda, but they aren't included on the list. Names of passengers, there's never any middle name or anything like that. So, you know, we usually dig a bit deeper to find out more there. Which class they were in. There were only 3 classes on the Windrush: first class, B class, which was a small number of seamen, and C class, which is where the vast majority of the West Indian men stayed. Then it's broken down into male, female, married, not married. Are you traveling with your partner or not? Addresses mean almost nothing, because the men had never been to England before. Most of them had never been to England before, so they almost just picked an address at random or shared an address with a friend. I would say the majority did not end up at the address that they gave on the passenger list, and there was nothing sinister about that. You know, they just weren't sure where they were going to be accommodated. I mean, when they set off from Trinidad, Jamaica, etc., they had no idea the deep shelter would be available. It hadn't even been thought of. Profession, occupation, again, a little bit dodgy, because a lot of the men, when they got here, they were given jobs way beneath their ability. You know, that they were given menial tasks to do, even though they were very highly qualified. A country of last permanent residence, again, very unreliable. It should be, have you lived somewhere for 12 months prior to the journey? But the Calypsonians, for example, from Trinidad, said that their country of last permanent residence was Jamaica, because they'd been working there for a few months. And the biggest misleading one is Bermuda. There were 166 passengers boarded at Bermuda, and most of them would have said their last residence was Bermuda, which kind of leads you to assume they must be Bermudan. But the majority were English dockyard workers who'd been working on a 13-month contract in Bermuda. So, you know, you've got to be careful that you don't jump to conclusions about, you know, people's backgrounds. Yeah, country of intended residence is usually England. Of course, a lot of the people on board weren't there for work. They weren't there for a permanent basis. Some people had come to England for education. Some people had come from a holiday. Some people had come from business. They weren't all seeking employment in England. So I think the passenger list doesn't tell us very much at all, but it certainly doesn't tell us what these people were like as individuals. So what I'm trying to do for every passenger is find a place of birth and a date of birth, because you only get an age on the passenger list. And some people did lie about their age. Some people had to, because they'd lied about it to join the RAF. So they had to continue that lie throughout the rest of the journey. And some of them did it for vanity. Some of them did it because they'd borrowed somebody else's birth certificate. So we do need to do a bit of digging to make sure we've got the right date of birth and so on. We need to find out what made them come to England. What was their background like in the West Indies? So, you know, they came from different backgrounds. Some of them were middle class, some of them were very poor. And we want to find out more about what the driving force was. Find out more about their parents, their grandparents. Had they served in the RAF? A significant number had, certainly not the majority. Who did they travel with? You know, we can't work out from the list who their friends were, who their relatives were. Did they travel across with friends that they kept in contact with for the rest of their lives? Importantly, what did they work at when they came to England? Did they stay? If not, did they go back? Where did they go back? Did they marry? Did they marry a white person or a black person? What was life like for them? Where did they live? Did they have children? What did the children go on to do? Because that's important Windrush generation information, as I'll show later. When and where did they die? Obviously important. So we want to collect that information for everyone on board. And I just want to finish by going through a few of those people that we found. First of all, one or two quite famous people. This is a Windrush passenger. And if we had an audience, I could ask you to shout out who it is. I hope David Clark, if he's still listening, knows who it is, because the flag should be a giveaway. Ricardo.
Yeah, yes, he raised his hand. But I think we're going to come to Ricardo at the end in the Q&A, Bill.
Well,
I think
anyway,
what happened, Ricardo wanted to say something, but not now.
Right.
We're going to get him. We remember his name. He had his hands up.
I don't think I could forget him.
We don't want to bring him in right away, but
Okay.
no, continue, Bill.
Yeah,
I've reported him. He was being inappropriate.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, this is Ellis Clark. He was the first president of Trinidad and Tobago. He was traveling on the Windrush with his mother to have a holiday. He was a barrister, and he was having a holiday in London. Arguably the most famous passenger on the Windrush. He was an unknown at the time. Obviously, it was a long time before he became president, but you know, he was on the ship. This is a lot of people know that Nancy Cunard was on board. Nancy Cunard being the heiress to the shipping fortune. She had rather a tragic life. She died in 1965 in poverty, really, with lots of addiction. She weighed less than 60 pounds. But Nancy Cunard was on the Windrush. This is an example of where we would never have known this lady was famous because she travelled under her married name, which she didn't use normally. Her famous name is Freya Stark, otherwise known as Dame. She was a Dame Freya Stark, writer, adventurer. She lived to be 100, but again, she was on board the ship. She was married to a senior officer in the Barbados government. That's why she was there. Now, this guy wasn't on the ship. This is Mcdonald Bailey. He was a very, very famous 100-meter, 200-meter runner. But the reason I'm showing his picture is that his father was on the ship. And his father's reason for coming across to England was to watch his son run in the 1948 Olympics. And even though it was the first time Trinidad had entered a team in the Olympics, Mcdonald Bailey chose to run for Great Britain. And he did reasonably well, got to the final. But in 1952 in Helsinki, he actually won a medal. And he went back to Trinidad at the end of his life, and he became a hero in Trinidad. So he wasn't being disloyal to his country. He just trained with Great Britain and thought he would follow that through. Now, I just want to get back onto, if you like, the ordinary people. Just three short stories to end with. I love this guy. This man's called Joe Armstrong, but to make research difficult, he's known as Wayne Armstrong in England. And although he looks like he's a singer there with a microphone, he's actually the double bass player that I mentioned off air earlier. Joe was a double bass player for a band called the Commandos in Jamaica. And the band leader was a guy called Delroy Stevens. And Delroy managed to convince his entire band to get on the Windrush and come across to England and forge a career there. And Joe was very reluctant to go because Joe's ambition was to play in the nightclubs of New Orleans, play the double bass there. It was all he ever wanted to do. But Delroy must have been very persuasive because he got Joe to come across to Liverpool, and the band set up there. And I think Delroy's trump card was, he said, if you come across to England, we're not too far from Paris, we can go to the nightclubs of Paris and play there. But Joe met and fell in love with this a Muslim lady, and married her, had 7 daughters who all doted on him, and lived happily ever after. But he never got to play in the clubs of New Orleans, never got to play in the clubs of Paris. But I love the photograph. You know, he's young, he's got potential and ambition and so on, and he had a great life. Yeah, the other 2 I want to talk about, I haven't got photographs of. The first one, I haven't got photographs of him because I haven't met him yet. Believe it or not, I'm finding Windrush passengers who are still alive. And there's a guy called Delissa Bernard who lives in Wolverhampton. And he's another that lied about his age in order to enlist into the RAF. And he is continuing to lie about his age. He's claiming to be younger than he is. He's well into his 90s. Yes. And I'm meeting him on September 20th, and really, really looking forward to it. But he was his background's quite simple. You know, he was a carpenter, and he was the son of a labourer, so he didn't come from anything sort of pretentious. And he was probably typical of Windrush passengers. He worked hard. He kept his head down. He brought his family up right. And it's his family that are the story in this one, really, because he had 4 children. One of them lives in Monte Carlo, where he's a hugely successful businessman. He employs thousands of people in this country, in England, in Britain. A daughter became an Olympic athlete. Her name's Verona Elder. She ran for Great Britain in the 72 Olympics. She won two gold medals in the Commonwealth Games, 2 silver medals in the Commonwealth Games. So huge success. And no less important, really, another son was a firefighter and a daughter was a nurse. So Delissa has introduced these 4 people into our country, and you know, they've added so much value. And you know, there's a lot of stories like this where the first line, the people who were on the Windrush, just kept their heads down and did a great job. But their children have gone on to great things and added great value. The last one I want to mention, and I'm not going to give his name here, and it'll be obvious why because I've not had direct contact with his family yet. But it's a guy called Vincent, and in 1944, along with a lot of Jamaicans, he went to Virginia to work as a farm labourer for 4 months. The following year, he went to New York to work as an industrial labourer for 12 months. And in 1948, he chose to get on the Windrush and go to England. So he certainly wasn't afraid of work. When he came to England on the Windrush, he'd already had a wife and 3 children in Jamaica, and he didn't bring them with him. He left them in Jamaica. And he quickly got a job in England. He got a job as a valet in a manor, a grand manor in Surrey. And he couldn't stand the cold, so he then trained to be a chef because he wanted to work in the kitchen where it was much warmer. So he did that. But as late as 1956, he was living in London in shared accommodation with 15 other people. So he didn't make the progress he'd hoped to have made. He was also living with a lady who shared his surname, who wasn't his wife. And he decided to come back to Jamaica the following year. He just gave up in despair. He said, I've given it 9 years. I'm going to go back. Unfortunately, he didn't tell his wife he was going back. And he took his girlfriend back with him. And he was spotted. And anyway, to cut a long story short, the pair were reconciled and they stayed together for 62 years, his wife and himself. So she was a very forgiving lady. But again, the story here is that his youngest daughter had a college sweetheart, and they married, and the sweetheart went on to be a multi-billionaire, one of the richest men in the whole of the United States. He's on I think it's the Forbes rich list. And she is now, she has one of the greatest art collections in the world, and she gives masses of money to charity. So, you know, it just shows that it's incredible going from being a, you know, the son of a labourer, a carpenter, to being the father of a shared billionaire. And there are so many stories like this in the Windrush, and it does make you think, were all ships like this? You know, but I think the Windrush was special, wasn't it? Because I think you had to be special to get on board, because these are real pioneers. And you know, as I said, these stories are commonplace. Almost everybody on board ship did something really great. And if they didn't do something really great, we're finding that their children or their children's children, a bit like Elijah, really. You know, it just goes on and on. And the story I was telling Elijah earlier was that Joe Armstrong, the guy I spoke about earlier, he played the double bass. And when he died, he donated it to the Paul McCartney School of Music. So it's still around in Liverpool somewhere. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say for the moment, Arthur, if that's okay.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Very well done, Bill. And I'm inspired because you've mentioned a good number of things that I didn't know myself. So thanks again, Bill. All right. Do you want to get out of the screen now?
I'm going to try.
Yeah, just slip out of the screen. Excellent stuff. Lovely, Bill.
What kind of family did you grow up in? Was it a big family?
Well, some of us, four boys, one girl, and your mother and your father. That's it.
And you said you were the eldest.
Mm-hmm.
And what did your father do?
He's a farmer.
He's a farmer.
Small farmer.
Mm-hmm. What kind of things did he grow?
He grew everything banana, chiefly in Portland, and then normal grown fruit.
What did he take it to market?
Yes, take them to market when they have enough.
Okay.
After feed 5 people, what leave we take it to market.
And I suppose your mother was very busy with bringing up the family.
She have 4 kids and a husband to look after, clothes to wash. She didn't have any washing machine, so she used her hand.
Okay. Okay. And did you have a wider family around you, an extended family?
Oh yes, it's a big family. Where we grew up is on a hill, and the given name Benjamin Hill.
Benjamin Hill, is that the name of the settlement of the village?
Well, it is where mostly people up there are Benjamin.
Okay.
The Benjamin generation from slavery. After slavery they are there. And then you have Martin and then the Williams. But the biggest people down up there, the biggest, they are Benjamin.
Okay.
But you have other people come in because they go outside and marry and come in and things. But
so what about the Richardsons?
Oh well, there's only 7 of us. Four boys, 1 girl, and the father and the mother.
Okay. And what was the town, the village or the town that you lived? What was the village that you lived in? What was the name of the village?
Oh, well, we call it Upper Freya Prospect.
Okay. And where did you go to school?
Freya Prospect School.
And was it a walk or?
Yes, got to walk along about a mile.
And is that where you knew Sam King? Or?
Yes, well, he's from East Clinton.
How is that a nearby place?
No, it's the other side.
So how come you went there?
Yeah, I go to Freya Prospect School is on that side.
Okay.
And Islington is that side.
Okay.
When you go into Islington, you cross over the Priestman's River.
Okay.
And that way, and the way to Port Antonio. But it's about 13 miles from Port Antonio, 13 miles from Port Antonio.
To Islington? Okay.
And we're about 14 to 15.
Okay. So you knew Sam from your boyhood days?
Yes, from school days.
Were you friends?
Well, we socialized a little, not much, because we always keep our way that way.
Okay, you came from a different part.
Yes, and you know the normal thing, stick to your own.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you used to play cricket?
Yes, I play cricket. I always picked my side and he picked his side.
So you were opposing the team?
Yes, all the time.
So who won?
We do it sometime and they do it sometime.
Okay. So how long did you spend at primary school? Did you go on to secondary?
No, I didn't. I just go primary school.
So what age would you have left school?
They school around 14, 13, 14.
Okay. And what did you intend to do once you left school?
I would start do little carpentry with my cousin.
Okay.
And then after that I go on farm work. The American was having during the war.
So why did you go on farm work?
Well, it's something to do. A young boy going up 16, 17, 18. You need a little trade and you need some money.
Okay.
Because we wasn't a rich people. So growing up I need money.
So why didn't you go into the RAF like other like Sam King?
I didn't feel like that. I didn't want to get myself in the army.
Yeah. Did your dad have any experience with the First World War?
Yes, he was in the 3rd Battalion, Jamaican 3rd Battalion.
And where was he stationed?
He's stationed in Belgium chiefly.
And was he in
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So he was lucky to survive?
Oh yes. Most of the West Indians.
Did he tell you what happened?
He never said much.
So here now to talk about those turbulent times as they emerged, please welcome Mike Phillips, who's co-author of a book on the subject, and Sam King, former Mayor of Southwark and one of the first arrivals from Jamaica in 1948. So welcome to you both. Now, Sam, in your case, you had actually been in Britain because you joined up with the RAF in 1944. Had you actually hoped originally to stay in Britain?
Yes, I volunteered for the Royal Air Force to fight for the mother country when I was 18. I would say we did our bit against Nazi Germany and we won. There was a tendency when you see an ad in the paper says there's a room to let it say Stockwell, in the evening paper or the Standard, you arrived and they would say no, and then you'd see a notice, no Irish, no black, no dogs. I thought the British liked dogs, but they said no dogs. At the same time, people eventually did let you have a room, resulting in some cases there were 4 people into one room. In my case, I went back into the Royal Air Force, and after about 2 years, with my brother, we started buying a property, 9 Sear Street, Camberwell. So the fact that I had a background and I had English family, 15 Montague Street, Bulwell, Nottingham, I knew the system. But many of my people had to sleep in the park because they were thrown out and all things like that.
Is it true that, although you were a Christian, probably are Christian, that at that stage you were thrown out of church? You weren't allowed to worship there? Not
exactly thrown out. That was harsh. You were nicely told that, is there not another church down the road that you would go? Now, my father was a warder of St. Mark's Church, Boston, for 30 years in Jamaica. I would say I knew the Church of England system. But at the end of the day, they told us in a nice way you were not wanted, resulting that gradually we start having home groups, meeting for prayer meeting, then we went into church halls, and after a while we start buying our own churches. Sad to say, we have a large amount of black majority churches today. It should never be. In Southwark, we have 30 black majority churches.
We're going to come to the end, and if we could get on screen Samuel-Adisa. He's going to take us out in his with a poem. Now this, I gave him an unusual poem, and I'm sure it's a challenge for him because this is a poem written by Benjamin Zephaniah. Samuel-Adisa. And it's important that to note that this young man, a man of 14, he's one of our talents for the future, and so on. So, Samuel, it's over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to read a section of Benjamin Zephaniah's poem called "The Men from Jamaica Are Settling Down." This poem was written in British patois, but I'm going to read it in my voice, still including the written changes. From the land of oil and water came they to where the air was cold. They come to work with bricks and mortar. They heard the streets were paved with gold. From the land of fish and ackee to the land of fish and chips came they, touching on a new reality where the sky was white and grey. Came they to hear with countless dreams, came they to hear with countless fears. In this drama of many themes, each one of them were pioneers. Each one of them a living witness, each one of them truly profound. A newspaper said, people hear this, the men from Jamaica are settling down. The men from Jamaica had come with their music. The men from Jamaica had come with their vibe. The men from Jamaica had come with their prophets. The men from Jamaica were truly alive to help keep their past and their future. So they did create great dedication. The great mother country was begging for more. The prophets had warned it may get complicated. They said that there was no quality law. There was no ackee, there was no saltfish. There was no star apple and no callaloo. Soon there was no time to dream, wonder or wish. There was so much community building to do. And back in Jamaica, they waited for letters. Where there were no letters, rumours were abound. But the newspaper said it was going to get better, and the men from Jamaica are settling down. They went to the foundries, they went to the factories, they went to the cities, to these true country folk. And when they got down to the true nitty-gritty, these true country lungs were soon covered with smoke. Some dreamt of Jamaica, some dreamt of their wives, some dreamt of returning to bring something home. Some prayed to their God, and they asked their God why the men from Jamaica should struggle alone. The struggle was human, the struggle was being. The struggle was charting uncharted territory. The struggle was opening up and then seeing. The struggle ahead for the community. The struggle was knowing the here and the now, and what kind of struggles were now to be found. So nobody knew just exactly how the men from Jamaica were settling down. Officially 492 came on June 21, 1948, but officials were playing a false numbers game. Now it's up to the people to put the record straight. We now know there are more than 8 stowaways, and now we know women amongst them were found. So the newspaper said, just after a few days, the men from Jamaica were settling down. We know that there were other lands represented, and the women survived just as well as the men. And we know that our history will be reinvented if we do not write truthfully with the black pen. Consider the struggles that took place before us. Tune into the bygone and try to relate to the brave folk that came on the Empire Windrush on June 21, 1948. Soon there were more ships and more ships and more ships. People with colourful Caribbean folk, men, women and children were making these trips, each one of them carrying shiploads of hope. From all the islands they came to this island. The National Health Service was so welcoming, and the movie-tone voice said that things were quite grand as the men from Jamaica were settling in. This was the new world. This was the white world. This was the world they had been waiting for. This was the world of righteous. This was a free world. This was the land of hope and the glory. This was the land of pleasant pastures green. This was the royal land. This was democracy, where many Jamaicans were proud to be seen. But it did not take long for the racists and fascists to show ugly heads as the wicked will do. Quite soon the arrivants had learned to resist, and quite soon they were dealing with subjects taboo. Blacks in the unions, blacks in the dances, whites with black neighbours, and black civil rights. The men from Jamaica were taking no chances. The men from Jamaica were not turning white. They created blues, dances, and carnival. The men from Jamaica were steadfast and growing. Despite Commonwealth and immigration controls, they learnt a few lessons, and soon they were knowing that there were no streets paved with silver or gold. A new generation rose up from these fighters, a new generation with roots everywhere, a new generation of buildings and writers, a new generation built in no fear. They too fought the Nazis, they too put out fires, they too want to broaden their vision and scope. They too need fresh water for burning desires. They, the men from Jamaica, are so full of hope.
Excellent, very well. Thank you very much indeed, Samuel-Adisa. Very well read, very well done, and I'm very, very pleased about that, because I only gave it to you maybe about a week ago, and extremely well. Excellent stuff. And I wish you all the very best as you, I presume you're going to be in your sort of GCSE year coming up, is it?
Yeah.
That's right. And you know, a couple of years time for your GCSE.
I'm doing some of them next year.
You've already started anyway.
Yeah.
And so on. Well, there you go. You see, there's a lot of promise for you. I'm sure that you will try to, you know, walk in your great granddad's footsteps. And by the way, I say footsteps. Whenever I see you and you move around, there's a degree of Sam King in you, which is good. It's your granddad, your great granddad, and it's important that you're as they say, you're part of that particular DNA. Your great granddad was a very proud Portlander, and that's a very important thing. In fact, John Richards, as well, as you know, as he said, was a Portlander, and very proud people. So thanks again. Now we've come to the end. I'm afraid of this program. We're hoping to have another one, a live one, on the 10th of September. That's the next thing that we're thinking of. We are planning that one live on the 10th of September, but we'll be able to send you information. We're also planning to see whether we could put it on YouTube. So those of you, there's one gentleman who I believe is in the audience from Japan, and again, it will help him to get involved with what we're doing, and not just to have live events whereby you can't hear if you're in Japan unless we have something like YouTube or Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. We're trying our very best to become very modern in the way we're approaching this project, and we can do it.